love to work with you. If you need merchandise for your company, organization, band, softball team, whatever, I can help. From name brand apparel to promotional items, large orders or small, online stores and more, I can help your brand stand out. AKC Marketing is local, based in Johnston, and we are an employee-owned business, so our costs are low and our turnaround times are fast. But most importantly, we give you personal service to make sure you get exactly what you're looking for. Email me at andrew@akcmarketing.com or find me on social media and let's make some cool stuff together. Now sit back and enjoy this Three Beards Media podcast.
Welcome back to In the Side of the Storm, where we talk all things Cyclones. We are coming to you live from the AKC Marketing Studio with Andrew Downs, sponsored by our friends in Osceola, Iowa, Revelton Distillery. Marcus, Pfizer, Brent, Curvey, how are you, gentlemen?
Alive and well. Alive and well.
Same here. Scorching. Still dealing with the 100+ temperatures like it's, you know, it is what it is. It's the desert.
I'm surprised you didn't melt in the 120-degree heat out there.
It is ridiculous. I try to stay inside as much as possible, but that doesn't work.
I don't know that you taught Chris Shipley much, because I think he went down to Phoenix and was out in the heat the whole time and complaining the whole time.
Well, if you're not living in this area, you're not used to it, and I mean it can be unbearable for sure.
And speaking of Chris, if you guys took notice there, we got a new intro. That was nice. Well done.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are in the big time now. Big time production skills.
It's above my pay grade.
IT person will be doing great. So we have a guest tonight. It's been a while. We're a little bit on our summer hiatus, but there's some fun things going on within the Iowa State University and Cyclone land, and obviously a key member of the university nowadays is Brent Blum, who is the executive director of the We Will Collective. And Brent, welcome aboard.
What a pleasure, guys. I appreciate you having me, and two of my favorite Cyclones of all time on this. Nothing against you, David, but with my guys Pfizer and Curvey. So I got to tell a couple quick stories, if you don't mind me getting started with the fellas here. So Marcus won't remember this, but Marcus was my camp counselor after his freshman year at Iowa State. I think so. It's right that transition year between Floyd and Eustacia at the Iowa State basketball camp. So that Marcus was my camp. He was my camp counselor, but he also, Marcus, you lived, because they must have put you up in the dorms right next to the campers. So you were right down the hall from me in Friley. Over in the corner. You got it. So a quick story. Again, Marcus won't remember this, but me and my buddy, we're thinking. I mean, I'm a huge Cyclone, so Pfizer's like my idol. And anyway, Marcus walks into our room to make sure we're behaving, and he sees that we have, at the time, it was some famous Amos cookies. And so for some reason, Marcus was like, "Hey, can I trade you some of those famous Amos cookies?" And I'm not saying no to Marcus Pfizer, for one. So I said, absolutely. What's the return on this trade? And Marcus walks over a VHS tape of the 1997-1998 Iowa State highlights basketball season. So that was the trade for the famous Amos cookies. But the story gets better. So we're done with the tape. We watch it and, watch my guy Marcus, watch our guy who was Paris Corner making
Paris
some
Corner,
shots.
yeah, I remember.
Yep. And so we'll bring it back to Marcus, and Marcus is in his room on like a landline doing like 50-pound curls. And I've never been so impressed with somebody in my life. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what a Power 5 basketball player looks like. And so Marcus, you were a good coach. I think you were a better player than a coach though at that time.
Yeah, that was a brutal summer. That was one of the many, jobs that I had that summer. Jobs I had that summer. The NILs wasn't around like it is now. So I had about 4 or 5 jobs that summer.
You would have made you'd be a different story now. And then so Curvey and I were in Iowa State at the same time. So I remember seeing Curvey on the elevator at Maple Willow Larch several times with Curvey, and then Berryman was with him. I know you guys were always together, so always think about you guys. But yeah, so some of my best years of my life were when you were holding down the fort at D tackle Curvey. So this is an honor to be here with you guys.
Man, appreciate it.
Well, and Brent, we're really enjoying having you on tonight as well. For those of us that know your background, maybe not everyone is familiar. You grew up an Iowa State fan, and obviously became a student, especially when these guys were still around.
Yep.
And then you graduated, and you worked for the Orlando Magic for a while in the NBA. Is that right?
Yeah, so I loved sports growing up. I clearly wasn't good enough to play like these guys. So I knew I was either going to have to do either officiating or broadcasting. So I actually did a little bit of both in college. But worked for the student radio station. So Curvey was always nice to me, even as a slappy little reporter. He was always good to me, which was great. But then, interned with John Walters when he was at Channel 5. And then actually my senior year at Iowa State, I called the Iowa State women's games along with Rich Fellingham, which was an awesome experience. Some really good players on those teams. Lindsay Metters Fenley was the point guard for those teams. And then randomly just decided to apply for the Orlando Magic. And I tell the story occasionally. It's a guy you guys will both remember. I send my cover letter to the Magic. I want to be the next person to go from Iowa State to the Magic like Kelvin Cato. So, at the time, Cato was he wasn't a real notable player at the time. I mean, he was at the tail end of his career. This was 2008. And the hiring manager calls me and says, I don't normally call people from Iowa, but anybody that puts Kelvin Cato in a cover letter, I at least have to give a call back to. So they flew me down there. They hired me. So I owe Kelvin Cato with my start in sports broadcasting. And then my first day down there, I realized the NBA was a different world, as Marcus knows, where these guys were throwing some bets around about if Marcin Gortat, this old Polish center, could dunk from the free throw line and all sorts of stuff. So I learned pretty quickly that I think I was more mature than Dwight Howard, but I was pretty starstruck. But you learned right away that they are pretty normal guys at the end of the day. And really 99% of them, as I'm sure as Marcus can attest, are really just normal guys that just happen to be very visible in the sport they play.
Gortat probably made that dunk.
He did. He was athletic as heck, man. So
I see. That's that thing. Like people will assume something different than what really, goes on, behind the scenes. And I would have taken that bet that he made it.
So you would have won money because his teammates, so they bet all of his new teammates, it was like $5,000-$10,000 that Marcin Gortat couldn't dunk it from the free throw line. So a couple of names that you'll remember, Marcus. So Anthony Johnson, the old point guard, and then Courtney Lee was a rookie on the Magic at the time. And so they were the newcomers. And that was, I guess, the initiation for the newcomers is Marcin would steal their money by betting that he couldn't dunk from the free throw line. So he does this, guys, and then he comes over to us in the media, and I'm going, oh my gosh, like literally Marcin Gortat made my salary in 5 minutes based on two dunks. And he comes over to us, he's like, I'm going to buy new rims for my truck. And I'm going, what the hell type of rim you buying for his truck? But yeah, it was Marcin Gortat, super good guy, by the way, but very more athletic than you realized.
Yeah.
So yeah, did that, and then ended up coming back to Iowa. I was there for a couple years, came back to Iowa, and then started working with the Cyclone Radio and TV network. But my day job for the last 10 years, along with doing the media stuff, was doing marketing and fundraising. So specifically, prior to taking on the NIL collective world, I was with the Iowa State Foundation, raising money for the Ivy College of Business. But really, my passion was in sports broadcasting and being around the Cyclones. So when the NIL opportunity came up, it was kind of a good mix of me of, being around sports still while still doing fundraising to keep the Cyclones competitive. And it's been a wild ride the last 2 years.
So what was it like to interview Brent Big Play Curvey during his days at Iowa State? You said he was gentle with you.
Yeah, he was always pleasant and fun to be around. I mean, there was all those guys really were. I mean, I didn't really have an issue with any of them. So, I'm still buddies today with like a Brett Meyer and a Todd Blythe. So those guys were always cool. Though they never let me into SIPs when I asked them to let me in. They got the VIP treatment that I didn't get. But yeah, I just remember Curvey was always awesome. And man, super, in my opinion, super underappreciated by the Cyclone fan base. You guys, that era, what made that defense good was the way you stopped the run. And between you and Nick Leaders, the ability to stop the run, it allowed the Jason Berrymans, the Sean Moorheads, all these guys to really get after it. And then between you guys up front, and then, the secondary was so good. I still think, with Mosier and Greedy Paris and LaMarcus Hicks and DeMarcus Jackson, man, you guys, I still think that 04-05 defense may be the best defense that I've seen at Iowa State.
I agree.
Brent, how do you feel knowing that you created Brent Blum's career
as
a journalist?
I didn't. I try to think back to like, damn, he interviewed me. Like,
that's again. I was a nobody.
I don't, man. You get to talking to people, and I know my mom was always like, you never know who you'll talk to now that you'll cross paths with later. So you always got to interact with the janitor the same way you do the president. Like nobody gets any different, sort of treatment. So, I mean, I've always been kind of a chill, humble guy, man. And, spirits are high, energy's high. I'll be the same way. So I like to think I'm still the same type of guy all these years later. So
now it's your chance to turn the tables.
Yeah. I'm guessing the questions Curvey would not be the same as when I was wondering. I don't want to bring this up, Brent, but the loss to Baylor at home was a tough one. I'm sorry about that one with the fumbles. So the one guy that I mixed up with a little bit, and not in a negative way, but just I remember asking him a question like I should not have asked that, was Greg Coleman. So he fumbled a couple times. Yeah. He fumbled a couple times in that game, and I might have asked him something, and he gave me a look like, don't ever ask me that again. And I was like, okay, I've noted now.
I forgot about it.
Yeah, but it was you guys were always super, super, super kind to me, and obviously Coach Mack was just the GOAT. So really enjoyed covering those teams.
Man. So was he your least favorite interview? Who was your least favorite interview?
Yeah, I mean, not to put anybody on the spot. Meyer didn't ever give you much. I mean, Brett Meyer was kind of a professional when the way he interacted with the media way back then. He didn't give you a thing. And now that I know him a little bit, I'm like, okay, you could have done a little bit more. I thought at the time, and I've gotten to know him now, so I can say this. I thought Todd Blythe was a bit of a prima donna. I was like, here's this guy from Indianola, and he's now this with all the folks on Welch and everything. But no, he's great now, and he gave you a lot. I'm trying to think if Austin Flynn was awesome at the time. So just some really, really good dudes on that team for sure.
Big Play, did the coaching staff give you any guidance on how to conduct the interviews?
Not really. Honestly, not really, because they didn't talk to everybody. I mean, it was one of those just talk through whatever you thought. I mean, I honestly don't remember getting a lot of coaching from the guys. There was always house business, like stuff that was in-house, you keep in-house type of thing. And that's just one of those unspoken codes, more or less. But I don't remember getting any like, hey, well, don't talk about this subject. But the reporters are always good on not touching on anything personal or, too tough. Like I know when Berryman went to jail for a little while. And I think that was a hot topic.
Yes.
Everybody was asking about it and talking about it. And it was just one of those things where, Haiti made a dumb decision type of thing, and he's dealt with it, and we kind of move on. So I think that was the only time where we heard something. But I mean, the reality was we just answered your questions to the best of our abilities, really.
Well, it seems like most of the coaches now, there's some hesitancy to put the freshmen up to the camera, which is probably smart choice, smart decision. And it gives you guys the athletes a chance to kind of get used to their atmosphere and get used to some of those questions that they could be faced with, so they're prepared when their time is up. What about you, Brent or Marcus? Did any coaches come up or give any advice on how to approach and work with the press?
I think my freshman year we had a couple different etiquette things that Tim Floyd put on that really helped us out with the progress and with the process, I guess you would say. And just like Brent said, I mean there wasn't many things that we really had to address that was outlandish or anything. We just pretty much talked basketball. I mean, my freshman year we were terrible. It wasn't until my sophomore, junior year where things started to change a little bit. But I mean, just being yourself and just talking about things that's going on. And the biggest thing they just try to tell us is, just watch the number of times that you say and and stuff like that. But other than that, just talking about basketball and continuing on. I remember my second year in the NBA when Tyson Chandler and Eddie Curry came, man, those guys were and to you to death, and so I remember speaking with Tyson about that, and he got a lot better as the years went on. But when you think about it, if it's nothing really too hard, you just speaking about basketball, speaking about natural things that's going on, it's not that hard.
Now the big thing that they do training for, as I'm sure you guys would understand, is a lot of social media stuff. I mean, I think, and Brent, with your son about to be a Power 5 athlete, that's where I would encourage all athletes, like stuff you even are putting out there now, they will find. Actually, just a quick story. I'm working on an NIL deal for an Iowa State football player, and this group did a background check on him and found a picture from when he was in high school that they flagged and said, could you please ask him to remove that, because that's not a good look for our brand. And so, I mean, as we get in this crazy NIL world, they're now being treated as professional athletes, and so you have to present yourself as such. And one of the things that we like to do with the Iowa State players is not only are we giving them, some financial guidance, some free, hooking up with free CPAs and some accountants and things like that to handle their financial side, but really what we do is also try and provide them with some presentation skills, speaking skills. How do you work with the community and with your networks? And when you go to events with donors and companies and all these things, how do you interact with people? And I think that is a part of NIL that doesn't get talked about enough. Of there really is a development to it of these guys, if you're going to maximize your NIL, you have to be approachable. And these brands want you, just like Brent and Marcus know, if you're going to work with somebody, even if you're 19 or 20 years old, you're still representing that company, and you have to act that way. And so that's been a big part of our emphasis too, is not only the financial resources we can provide, and obviously that's key in staying competitive, but also the auxiliary pieces to make you a professional, no matter if you play professionally or not.
Brent, what's a day in the life for you as being in charge of the We Will Collective? I mean, we're not talking about a company with 500 employees. I mean,
that'd be nice.
It's a pretty small staff, right? It's you and Crystal, and
we have a team of two, really, and it's me and my wife, who she joined full time January 1, but we're dealing with, in a way, 140 employees, and those are the players. And so that's kind of the first priority for me, is answering the biggest things for me are, one, making sure the players are happy, because a happy player will not look elsewhere, honestly. And so paying them on time, paying them what we promised, paying them and helping out their families if something comes up, things like that. If I have a call between a donor and a player, I'm going to answer the player first, because ultimately that is who we are serving. But beyond that, it's making sure they're taken care of first and foremost. But then secondly, honestly, it's fundraising. So And you've got some of these schools now that are spending $15, $17, $18 million just on football. And so it's hard. It's hard to compete in that. So we're trying to find all these creative ways. The great thing about Cyclone Nation is we do have a lot of fans. And like I tell everybody, even getting the casual person on Twitter to give $10 a month really does add up if you have 5,000 people doing that. And so for me, it's coming up with marketing plans to try and get the word out, but then also, just traditional fundraising. So talking to those folks who have capacity to give those larger gifts. So when I'm not doing the day-to-day actually running the accounting and picking up the mail and doing all those things, a lot of my time is simply spent with donor relationships and fundraising with hopes of keeping Iowa State competitive, because our peers are more than, the amount of money being raised right now in the NIL space is crazy. And so we have to do all we can to survive until it's regulated. And I think the regulation is coming, but even at that point, there's still going to be some wiggle room, and it's never going to be a point where college athletes say, or really anybody, any profession, hey, we're good, we have enough. And so if you want to have an advantage, you got to keep doing more and more and more. And so that's really what we do on a daily basis, is keep the players happy, keep the donors happy. But at the end of the day, it's raised more to keep the coaches happy, because the coaches are only going to be able to remain competitive if they have the players to stay.
What's the typical donor look like from a contribution standpoint?
Yeah, that's the neat part. So we have this is I'm super proud of this and proud of Cyclone Nation. We are pushing about 10,000 total donors, which is actually more than gives to the Cyclone Club, which is really, really cool. But our typical donor, honestly, is the $10 a month person, or the person who gives $25 on Venmo when they can. Obviously, in the rule of fundraising, it's 80-20. So 80% of your dollars come from 20% of the people. So those are the bigger gifts that move the needle. But what we found out is we're closer to, our numbers really do add up. And so we're not like an Oregon who has Phil Knight who can just say, here's $20 million, have fun with it. We have to do it with those $10, $25. Sure, we'll take the $5,000, the $10,000 gifts as well. But it takes a whole village to figure this out. And so our average gift size is $25, David. So that's what we're working with. So we're almost doing it the grassroots way. And if you can do it with numbers, then you don't rely on the emotion of one big donor saying, hey, I'm not in anymore. And so that's why we've been able to, I think, continue our momentum is, even if a donor gets upset, we have enough buffer with all the other things that we're able to stay competitive.
And I know I've attended several events, and Chris Shipley has as well. I've heard the big numbers that have been out there in terms of what athletes are either asking for or what universities are promising. Back in their day, I'm going to ask you kind of a trick, maybe not a trick question, but a different question. Back in the day, how much would Marcus Pfizer have been worth, and how much would Brent Big Play Curvey have been worth at the height of their NIL collective prowess? Oh, it looks like we lost Brent.
Man, see, look at you. You pissed him off, Dave. What's that about? No. Just
I
guess me and Brent would have broke the bank.
Right, that's it.
Yeah, that's the answer right there.
System crash. System crash right now. Oh, man.
All right, Marcus, the nut job. What's the nut job about? So for those of you who are maybe listening and not watching, Marcus has a new title tonight as nut job. And you told us before we got started, you tell us what that was about.
Apparently it's not new. Apparently, there was some excerpts written in a book by an ex-teammate of mine that, referred to me. And I think you would probably be the only person in my lifetime that would ever consider me a nut job. It was an ex-teammate of mine in 2 occasions that I would love to one day have a conversation with him about that. So until then, I'm going to refer to myself as nut job, since he so eloquently identified me as being a nut job. So
is there any talk? You guys are coming up on your 25th anniversary. Is it 25 that you guys are coming up on? Is there is the athletics department reached out about a reunion at all?
They have. I've been speaking with a few different people. Matter of fact, one of my best friends, Thomas Watkins, we text. I think it was today, earlier this morning, or either yesterday about it, and he's asking me about it. What are the plans and things like that. I told him I don't know off the top of my head right now because at that time, Marcus Jr. would be, in school, and I don't know, what his schedule is going to be like if he's playing or not. So we'll see as the time gets closer and closer, and what that will be. But yeah, we've been in talks about it, trying to wrangle everyone up together.
Hey, Brent Blum, welcome back.
Sorry, guy. I think my kids are on YouTube too much, so they screwed up the internet for me. So,
Marcus knows that all too well, doesn't he?
Going through the same thing.
You're calling the Pfizer on us.
I got two different internets in my house.
That's the way to go. I'm gonna need a professional, dedicated line here. The kids are watching too much Peppa Pig or something. Man, I don't know.
And maybe it's Robux or whatever.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, probably.
Well, or the new EAS college football game. Have you guys tried that yet?
I want to. So I've got a 6 and a 4-year-old guy, so I can't blame it on my kids yet. So I'm hoping they get old enough so then I can purchase the PS5.
So I got a college age kid,
and I've already gone through 2 seasons and hit the transfer portal twice.
There you go. How was your transfer portal recruiting? Got any tips for me?
None at all. It's you just point and click whichever one you want. Don't ride the bench though, because from what I understand and stories I hear, you better make sure you're a starter before you move to another school, because you'll just be simulating a whole lot of games that way.
I thought I was going to lose my mind when I saw on Twitter that Abu Sama had entered the transfer portal, and then there were comments about it was on EAS college football.
Yeah, don't believe that.
So, Brent, when you just left there, I guess the question was being posed back in their heyday.
Yeah.
What do you think the NIL value would be or would have been for someone like Marcus and Brent?
It's funny because I was thinking about that when I was coming on here today. You guys are at 2 of the most viable positions in college athletics right now. I don't want to make it feel bad, like you didn't get what you deserved, but honestly,
we didn't. 100%.
Nowhere close. Nowhere close.
We all agree here.
We had to sign what we had to sign in order for the kids to have what they have now. We get it, but Hey.
So the most viable positions in football, it's just right now in Power 5 football, are the quarterback is number 1. But then really it's defensive line, and specifically defensive tackle. I mean, it's just hard to find those guys. And there's a reason why. And one of Iowa State's best defenses was when Curvey was there and Leaders was there. And why Iowa State's been fairly solid the last 5 to 6 years is they've had really good defensive line play. I truly believe that defensive line really is the make or break difference. When Iowa State's been poor defensively on the line, if you can't stop the run, you can't do anything in football. I mean, that's at the end of the day. So D-line's big. Offensive tackles are getting up there. I mean, it's just very similar to the NFL. I mean, you can almost draw parallels on the football side. And then for college basketball, if you can find a post, if you're a post in today's environment, you're getting paid. I mean, end of story. And Marcus, I don't want to even put a number on what you would, if you were the portal now let's just say after your sophomore year, after your junior year. Again, I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but you would have been offered at least $1.5 million, at least $1.5 million. So that's what some of those guys, the high end for big post players, are getting, specifically productive post players in the portal. And yeah, that's the nature of it. Now guards are a little bit different because it's just like demographics. There's just more guards out there than bigs. So if you're a skillful big and you can shoot it, you're going to be doing quite well. And some of these guys really are. Thankfully, at Iowa State, we've been able to kind of weather the storm with some of those guys. They love playing for Coach TJ and all the extra stuff. But Hunter, it's no mystery. Hunter Dickinson at Kansas is making well over $1 million per year, and you could argue he deserves it because the amount of money brought in to that athletic program. So I'm never going to begrudge the kids ever in this space. But that's just what the market is. And finally, these guys are getting what the market dictates, and that's what the market dictates.
Yeah, that probably would have got me back for my 4th year.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, Mark. The thing is, a lot of these guys, and you're a different story because you were, top 5. But a lot of these guys that are fringy, end of first round, maybe your second round. The good example is the kid at North Carolina, Bacon. He stayed because he got paid more at North Carolina last year than he would have as a second round pick. And so there's educated decisions that these players are making of, I might be better off, especially if I like college, hanging around because I'm going to get more endorsements as the big man on campus at North Carolina than I will as, the 11th guy on the NBA bench or playing in the G League.
Right.
And so there are sophisticated conversations that are happening on the college football side, similar specifically for a quarterback. Those guys are getting just like big post players. I mean, there's quarterbacks in this space that are making $2 million at least for some of the high end guys because it's really hard to find a good quarterback, and it's football. You need a good quarterback to win, and so those guys are
in the Big 12, huh?
Exactly. Yeah, and there's some really good ones. So that's what we're very grateful to have Rocco back as the Iowa State quarterback because Matt said this publicly. We've shared it on some of the stuff we've told our donors is he had multiple opportunities to really chase the money, and he decided to stay because number one, like he told us, is I love it in names. I love my coaches. I love my teammates. And he's like, I want to win a championship and I want to do it in names. And so you're going to, the great part is these kids they have to make really adult decisions, and very grateful for them for literally, I think we're the only Power 5 program that kept every starter in men's basketball, women's basketball, and football this past year. And it's not necessarily to do with, obviously us helping them financially is a part of it, but really it's the culture of Iowa State and not wanting to let their teammates down. That is the bigger part of it, because if it was dollar for dollar, these guys all had better opportunities.
Yeah. It's interesting. I know this group, we've talked a lot about the commitment level, and Marcus and Brent have shared their thoughts over the months of, hey, once you commit to that program, I'm committed. And we've talked about what would you have done had NIL been available. Yeah. And Rocco was really a chip off the old block of Marcus and Brent because he has stuck around and he's made that commitment. And you had a very special event for athletes up in Perry here a couple of weeks ago that he basically donated a lot of his NIL dollars towards that program.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was one of the cooler things we've been able to do. And I'm glad that got some attention. You hear some of the negative stuff of, oh, this player got this or that, or they're getting this and they're getting this, the Lamborghini or whatever. And really people like Rocco and his teammates too. I don't want to, so Rocco paid for his teammates to be there for one, which is really cool. So he helped out his teammates with his NIL earnings, and he made a very generous donation to Perry, who has obviously gone through a lot with the tragic school shooting in January, and then also with some other community things that have happened to that town. So it was awesome. And there was 100 kids from Perry, only open to Perry kids. And they had a 3-4 hour camp with all the top Iowa State football players that all, went out of their way to make these kids' summer, I hope. And it was all Rocco's idea. We helped facilitate it. We helped put the camp together, but it was him. And again, one of the really neat things that NIL can bring about. Sure, he's got compensation that allowed him to do that, but the impact that'll have on future Cyclone fans is very similar to the time when Marcus gave me that VHS tape. So I still remember that, and you wonder what some of those kids that got to do a camp for 4 hours with the 12 best Iowa State football players. What will that mean? 8 years down the road when they're deciding where to go for school, and it's just incalculable how much positive effects that things like that can happen down the road. And I hope people are proud of their donor dollars are going to really good causes to really good kids.
Well, Brent, do you still have that tape? Because I know Marcus does not have the cookies.
I only had one copy. Oh, you said I didn't have the cookies.
Yeah. I gave the tape back. It was a 1 hour trade. He got the cookies, but I had to give the tape back.
I see.
I just remember that year, Paris Corner hit like a half court shot. I want to say against like Colorado or something that freshman year. So I remember that was a big part of that tape.
Yeah, that was against Colorado with the current Orlando Magic coach Jamal Mosley.
That's right, Mosley. Yeah. Good stuff.
Small world.
I could nerd out with Marcus over that whole 2000 season. That the 99-2000 team is still my favorite Iowa State team of all time. Still my favorite. I mean, I remember those. I remember each of those losses like it was yesterday. I remember the wins too, Marcus.
I do remember the losses.
We have some video, and we're going to take a quick break, and I want to come back, and we're going to have a little bit of walk down memory lane for both Marcus and for Brent. And I also want to talk a little bit about the changing landscape with the NCAA lawsuit and what that's going to mean for the future of NIL. So let's take a quick break and hear from a word from our sponsor, Revelton Distillery.
Making great tasting bourbon requires the perfect combination of ingredients, conditions, and time. The longer it rests, the better it tastes. Revelton Distillery's new single barrel bourbon is made from 80% corn, sourced 100% from Iowa farmers. And unlike mass-produced bourbons, each barrel of Revelton's single barrel bourbon is unique, proofed on when it tastes best. As they like to say, it'll be ready when it's ready. And to ensure the highest standards of quality and flavor, owners Rob and Christy Taylor oversee the production and bottling. Every single barrel. Iowa born, Iowa aged, Iowa bottled. Try the new single barrel bourbon from Iowa's own Revelton Distillery. ReveltonDistillery.com.
All right, we're back, and here's my favorite right there, the Revelton Mulberry Gin. If you've not tried it, pick it up. That's my flavor of the week this week. So we were talking a little bit before, and I want to get to the videos here shortly. But Brent, there is that lawsuit that the universities are now going to have to pay a considerable amount of money back to the players, which I know Brent and Marcus will fully support. How is that going to change what's going on with you and the NIL programs, not only for Iowa State, but for all the universities? And have there been early discussions that have begun with the athletics department on how that's going to look?
Very much so. And I think that's where I'm grateful to have so many great people at Iowa State. We're all kind of figuring this out together. So the Cliff Notes version here is the settlement, which will be signed at some point here in the next month, and it'll go into effect January 1, will not only have back pay for athletes back to 2015. So sorry again, Curvey and Marcus, no money for you on the back pay. But it then also allows up to $22 million that each school can spend in NIL compensation for its current athletes. And so schools are going to have the ability to spend up to $22 million. They don't have to spend a thing, though. And so I think this is where it gets tricky for all these athletic departments. Just like any business, they weren't counting on a $22 million expense. So that is hard to get up to speed right away. Now your monsters in the SEC, I'm going to guess will find a way to get to $22 million. But what does that mean for collectives, and what does that mean for the outside NIL things? Nobody's really sure. And so that's where everyone's taking a wait and see approach from number one, and I'll just give you the Iowa State version. How much money can we raise up to that $22 million? Because obviously the more you raise, the more competitive you're going to be. Number two, how does Title IX fit into this? It's still a question. Does it have to be equal? There's differing thoughts on that matter. And if it doesn't, then how do you break up that $22 million? Is it based on revenue brought in? College football brings in roughly 80% of the funds for an athletic department. Do you split that up then 80% college football, 15% men's basketball, 5% women's basketball? Do you give anything to the Olympic sports? Nobody really knows these things yet. And so those are the questions that are being asked. And then the other part of that lawsuit is potentially, they're not going to outlaw collectives, but collectives will almost morph more into what are, I would say, are marketing agencies in that there's going to be a clearinghouse through some new entity with the NCAA that has to approve all NIL deals that aren't through the school. Therefore, you can't just go to a car dealership, show up for an hour, and get $1 million. There has to be fair market value for whatever that appearance is. And so there's going to be more checks and balances. Will hopefully eliminate some of the reckless, pay to play from the boosters, and thus almost be a salary cap in place. But there's so many layers to get there. I talked to some colleagues in this space who they think their schools are going to max out the 22 million, but then still have upwards of 5 to 10 million through their collective through these other NIL deals. And so even if there is a cap at 22, your big schools are still going to try and push the envelope higher because they can. And so for Iowa State, we're trying to figure out, all right, we need to be competitive. We can't just find $20 million. So how does it work? How do you all work together? Does the athletic department, do they sign these players to NIL contracts themselves? Does it go through a third party that facilitates everything? So there's lawyers involved, there's administrators involved, and I'm team Iowa State. So whatever Iowa State chooses is the best way to go for Iowa State. I will go with it. There's a possibility I may not have a job in a year if collectives are banned and I don't end up at Iowa State, but we're just kind of along for the ride. And my goal is to keep Iowa State on the life preserver until we get these regulations in place. And once regulations are in place, I do think there's a world where once you know the rules, you can compete. It's just the problem right now is there are no rules and there are no salary caps. And so it's really hard for the coaches to know, what do I need and how do I evaluate? Because it literally is month to month and day to day of what is necessary to compete. So all I know, David, it's going to change. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to look, but Cyclone fans should rest assured they've got really smart people in the athletic department and then on our team that are trying to figure this out together and going to make Iowa State as competitive as possible.
Isn't the risk of you get to this salary cap type of program and then there's still boosters at these larger schools that are just slipping money to these athletes back like they used to before NIL?
Yep. And that's exactly what will happen. Now, the goal is to get – I mean, right now, like in Iowa State compared to Texas, it's just not – it's not fair because just to give you real numbers here, Texas has an athletic budget of $310 million this year. Iowa State's was just a shade over 100. And so if you just extrapolate that out, 3x and you're in the same conference, you were. So how is that reasonable to compete? It's not. I mean, there's a reason why all the professional sports have a salary cap and a draft, or else the Yankees, the Cowboys, all these teams, the Lakers would just run away every year. But they put parameters in place to keep it competitive, and right now that's not in place. And so the issue you're going to run into is even with these caps in place, those schools – football means a lot in the SEC. They're going to find ways around it, just like they always have. But the goal would be if you have some sort of regulation or enforcement mechanism, maybe they're not as open about it and they'll keep it, even if it's under the table, it's better than it is right now when some of these guys are literally getting millions of dollars just to come to a school. And that's just not sustainable for the Iowa States of the world.
Yeah, it's been going on for a while. I mean, I got a story about University of Texas. You said Texas. I was, in transition after a couple injuries in the G League, or it was the D League back then in Austin, trying to, work my way back to playing shape and all that different stuff. And, at the time, I was dating a girl that actually played for the softball team, on the University of Texas softball team, had some good teams. And so I was going to the weight room, the training facility, at UT. And I pulled up. This is the honest to God truth. I pulled up, literally driving, I had a Bentley at the time. And I pull up and I see other Bentleys and, convertible and everything like that. And this is the football facility. So I'm a little confused. And I get inside and, she was in there working out and training and things like that. And I said, this is when Vince Young and the rest of those teams, guys. Okay. Yep. I said, G-Wagons and all. I said, who cars are those outside? And she was like, she laughed it off with that. I'm like, no, I'm serious. Like, she was like, well, you're driving the Bentley. I said, I'm the pro. These guys are not pros. I said, where are all these cars coming from? And so, like, you can hear all of the football players around, and they're just laughing like crazy. And I said, you know what? It is what it is. It is what it is. And I understood, like, it's such a different playing field. You know, they won the national championship the year.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's crazy when you guys beat Texas. It's when Iowa State beats Texas, you know, sometimes specifically in football, you know, in that Rhodes era, they almost celebrated over the top, but it is a huge deal. I mean, it is such a disadvantage. And what Iowa State won 4 of the last 6 against Texas under Campbell. So it's hard. It's hard to compete with those guys. And then you give them a blank check with no rules. And it's like this weird, and they're not alone. I mean, like Georgia, Ohio State, all these schools, and it's a race. Like who can spend the most? It's a point of pride for those donors down there. And everyone says, will it ever slow down? And I would always say, if you have money, power, and ego, there's nothing stopping you. And so it's really hard to compete. So I'm hopeful we're through. I like to say in my analogy, I think we're in the 7th inning of this thing. So there's still some storm to weather here, but we've gotten through at least the 2 years where it's been super reckless and been okay. It's just hard to stay that way because you're banking on 19 and 20-year-olds, you know, being super, super loyal, which they are. But at the end of the day, we're all, you know, I wouldn't stay at a job for a fifth of the salary. And I don't expect our student athletes to either. And that's what they are. I mean, that's a lot of them are giving up a lot of dollars to stay in Ames.
Just the challenge there is you're hoping or expecting someone to step forward and have the balls to set rules. And the NCAA is just not that. I mean, we've seen it over the years. They just don't have it. And that's my concern is that there's no one there that's going to set these rules and hold schools accountable.
Yep. And they get the blame always, but it's not, I don't always, now the NCAA is way too slow to react to all this stuff, but now it's people that are, you know, the main power brokers in college athletics are, you know, really the conferences. So schools in the SEC and the Big Ten, those elite schools, they don't want the little guy to be competitive. They have the advantages because they have the money. And so they have not been really willing to say, hey, yeah, put those guardrails in because it's to their advantage. It's to Georgia's advantage to keep it this way because Georgia's really successful with these rules. And so you almost need a czar of college athletics to say enough is enough. We all have to be on the same page. But right now, so I'm watching the Game of Thrones. I know I'm like 10 years late. I get it. But right now we've got like the 5 kingdoms here, and they're all fighting each other because each commissioner doesn't want to lose its job. So if you have one commissioner that oversees all of it, 4 commissioners are going to lose their job at that point. And so you really, you know, when ego, money, and power, nobody wants to give that up. And so that's why it's been hard for any rules to be put in place because there's always somebody when you put in a rule who wants to challenge that rule because they feel like they're losing their power.
Yep. That's why I'm kind of reluctant to the fact of thinking that it's even going to go through. There's going to be some kind of stalling, you know, even if there's a time that comes about where it has to be signed or is going to be signed, somebody's going to challenge it, even if they're not saying anything about it right now, because, you know, stall tactics is what we do best in this country, and that's what's going to happen.
It's a great point. Yep, and that's where we're kind of on the Iowa State end, we're kind of taking all angles now. It's like we might have to be around as a collector for more than we think. It may get settled soon. So you got to be very flexible to see where it goes. I agree with you, Marcus, that this is not going to end. There's going to be a lot of hiccups along the way. And so the athletic departments and the collectives that work together to weather those hiccups are going to be better off. But at the end of the day, what I always tell our donors, anyone I'm meeting with, is honestly, the more funds you can raise now, it only helps because I know we're going to use it in a great way. And if we have extra that we can give to Iowa State if we go away, then so be it. So the more the better, honestly, to stay competitive. But again, we're not in a vacuum here. Everybody else is thinking the same way. And so it's just going to keep rising. And I would say it's a great time to be a college athlete. I mean, it really is. And I'm glad for them that they finally get what they deserve. But it's, you know, these guys, and it's the way it should be. There's so much money in college athletics that it's about time. But it's also frustrating for guys like you who would have definitely benefited from that. But I'm glad now that we're to this point. I just think we need a couple more rules in place to make it a little bit of a fair fight.
Yeah, because I declared for the NBA draft because my parents' house burned down during the season. My parents hadn't even told me about it. Again, this is back in the time before cell phones and all of that. So they just allowed me to play. It wasn't easy getting information to me, anything like that. So I literally had no idea that the fire had happened in February, and they didn't tell me about it until we lost to Michigan State. So, that definitely, we said jokingly earlier, but that definitely would have gotten me back for my fourth year.
All right,
yeah, that's been the neat part. Yeah, and one real quick, one last thing for you guys. The neat part for me is working with the athletes and their families, and you guys know you play with teammates that, they're not all from Iowa. They're not coming from much. A lot of them, their parents had never been to Iowa before. And so one of my favorite stories is we had a football player. He was a fifth-year senior. His parents had never been to Ames because they couldn't afford it. He used his NIL money to fly them up to see him play in his senior day. First time they'd ever been to Jack Trice. And those are the really cool things that can happen thanks to NIL. And I'm glad some of that gets attention, but I think the general public thinks, oh my gosh, all these athletes are making so much money. There are some that are doing quite well, but the reality is $5,000-$10,000 for some of these guys and gals gets a plane ticket to fly their folks to come watch them play.
That's a big deal. You're absolutely right on that, Brent. All right, so let's have some fun here. Brent and Marcus had unquestionably outstanding seasons for the Iowa State Cyclones. They had some big plays as well. And Brent, you didn't necessarily have the opportunity to call their plays because you were either in school or maybe in junior high when it came to Marcus. So I think Chris is going to pull up Brent Curvey in one of his games, and we're going to give you an opportunity to
oh my gosh
broadcast to the world as if you were there that day. One of the plays that Brent Curvey made as an Iowa State football player.
Got to be a scoop of score in there. Got to be a scoop of score.
I got an idea what it might be.
All right, so Chris, here we go.
Oh, this is Baylor.
Footage.
Are we going? We're going. Okay. So this is in Waco.
It's so bad.
This is in Waco. We're in the 1970s. It looks like.
That's it.
Okay, here we go. Out of the pistol formation. A hit by Tyson Smith. Picked up by Curvey. There he goes. Curvey. 30, 20, 10, 5. Touchdown in the end zone. Big play, Brent Curvey. 75 yards on the scoop and score.
Were you out of breath?
Pretty good, right?
Was I?
I love the fact that you can call out Tyson Smith through that grainy video.
That was Tyson Smith, right? Did I get Tyson right there?
Yeah, that was Tyson. That was Tyson. The crazy part about it, some people know, and I think I've mentioned it before, but that game we got locked in an elevator. So we got stuck in an elevator. And me and Tyson were talking about it. We was like, bro, because that defense we had just put in, like, look, if I hit him, you score. You hit him, I'm going to score. And it happened in that game. We were so pissed. We were in there hot, in the elevator for like 20 minutes, no movement, waiting on, somebody to let us out. And me and Tyson talked about it, man, and it happened. It was just, it was the craziest thing.
So you had to have had a wide open look because you're raising your arm at about the 20-yard line knowing you're going to score.
Man, see, people don't audio visual stuff I loved, right? So I had my godbrother worked in that audio visual space, and he was like, there's always a delay. That's what he told me. So when you see a monitor, a show, and all of that stuff, there's always a delay. So when I'm running, my eyes are always up because I'm looking at the monitor. So I'm like, oh, if I see myself, okay, I'm good. I saw nobody behind me, so I was like, oh, we're good. So same thing happened with Colorado. I looked and I saw somebody coming. I was like, oh shit, it's about a second, so let me start move forward. You got to use everything, man. You know what I'm saying? Look, running
that wasn't even HD. That wasn't even HD. Yeah.
Right. So it's like almost a 2-second delay. So as soon as you saw anything, you better take off. So
That looked like a VHS tape that Marcus may have recorded off the VCR.
That probably was a VHS tape. It's hard to believe that was in the 2000s.
Hey, you know what the crazy thing is? If I remember right, that game wasn't on TV. That was because I couldn't watch it. That was radio only back in Iowa. So
it was not.
Great when Curve played in 2000. I looked this up once. In 2004, only 3 of Iowa State's 11 games were even on television.
Wow.
That's crazy how much it's changed, and that's where the money all comes in too.
That's it. Yeah, that's so true.
All right, so we heard you replaying Brent's play. Let's now turn to Marcus, and we'll turn to the hardwood and give you a chance to call out one of Marcus's plays.
Oh, here we go. All right, 25 seconds left. Iowa State on the road in fog, looking for a first win there in literally 16 years. Nurse Handley gets it over to Horton. 8 on the shot clock. Iowa State's got to go. It's Tinsley spinning over to Horton. 3 on the shot clock. Iowa State's got to go. Pfizer fadeaway from 18. Good. You got to be kidding me. Pfizer with a dagger. Iowa State up 4. 6 seconds left. And this is just another gym at Fog Allen.
And then he gets yelled at by Larry Eustachius.
Of course. Immediately. He was yelling for us to get over there to the timeout.
I thought you were going to do the Texas one, but I like the curveball there with I think that shot's underrated. That was a massive win. Massive.
Oh, yeah.
That was a big win. Big win. That was one of the most focused games probably. Like, even after we got into the locker room, I remember being in the locker room and us sitting down like it was halftime. Like we weren't even celebrating. We were sitting down like it was halftime. We were still that locked in.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's cool. Yeah. That was one of those ones. So I'm going to age myself. I was a freshman in high school watching that, and I mean that was better. That was better than my homecoming dance. Going to be honest. Yeah. Well done. That season still. You guys should have. Well, I'm not going to bring up the Michigan State game because I want to sleep tonight. But
right.
still think you guys should have won the national championship, and I'm going to go to my grave thinking that.
Me also. I lost a lot of sleep after losing that game. A lot of sleep.
I don't think anyone disagrees with you, Brent.
Well, that was fun, guys. Chase Shipley, good work, man. That was I enjoyed that. So
yes, thank you, Chris Shipley.
Got it.
I tried to find the scoop and score against Kansas that Curve had, but there's no video of it whatsoever. I mean, I could not. There's no video of it anywhere.
I think it's Curve and AJ Klein have the most defensive touchdowns in Iowa State history. Pretty sure. So there you go. Curve's still in the record books.
Who's the fastest?
Man, I don't know.
Hey, listen, as long as you get there, it don't matter how fast.
Who's the quickest? Say that one, the quickest.
66.
I wasn't the fastest, but I was quick.
That's it.
Well, and Brent, you were like a cat. I mean, you were just you found those spots, and then once you had the ball, you were gone.
Oh, opportunities don't happen often. You better take advantage of them. That's how I looked at it. So I told Coach let me run a few. I was batting 1,000. I was like, when the ball's in my hand,
put you a fullback. Yeah.
But they never let me do it. They talked about it, got me excited, but never. Didn't want to risk it. So much for that.
All right. Well, it's been fun, guys. Boy, Brent Blum, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge about We Will Collective. And, if there's anything that listeners or viewers can do to help contribute to We Will, how can they do that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, easiest, just go to the website, wewillcollective.com. And what I share with you guys, every bit does make a difference. It literally takes all of us. And again, I don't think we're going to be in this forever, but we're in for a special year, guys. I'm so excited for Iowa State football and the basketball season. And this area is so much better when Iowa State athletics is thriving. And so I want to keep it that way and keep the great coaches we have. So everybody can do their small part, buy a beer, buy an Ames lager, do whatever you can. And wewillcollective.com has all that info. And I just want to say, guys, this has been a pleasure for me. It's great to see Brent and Marcus again. And seriously, hope you keep in touch. And
pleasure's all ours.
Hope to see you, Marcus. What we need to do, and I know this is a pride point for me. I really want to get your crew back because it's hard to believe, but this is, I think it's year 24 or 25. for that 2000 team. And man, you guys, I know you're still recognized. We need to get you, the whole crew, as much as we can back in Hilton for a celebration, because I'm telling you, you guys made a huge impact on so many Cyclone fans just like me. And tip my cap to both of you for what you did for Iowa State.
Well, appreciate it. We were just hooping, being kids trying to win that national championship.
I'm going to thank my famous Amos cookies for your rise.
It got me through. That was a trying summer right there, man. That was a real trying summer right there.
All right. Thanks, guys. And that's another edition of In the Side of the Storm. We'll see you next time.